All right. Okay. She might have even told me that ahead of time. She might have even told me that ahead of time. I didn't see it. Got it. Okay, we'll get started. We'll jump back into why of domestic violence. Chrissy, and you could do from current slide. Talking about biological forces, there's a lot here, so we'll just kind of do a short version. And to me, this is powerful. And so anybody that's heard me talk has heard me talk about it. And you've probably had it in your degree program if you already have a degree. But we're going to review it. And, you know, just to remember terms, autonomic nervous system has to do with your automatic processes, you know, your heart rate, your temperature, your some of the natural body processes that would all work without you consciously thinking about it, okay? So within that system, you have a sympathetic nervous system and a parasympathetic nervous system. And these two are opposite of each other. They can't both be working at the same time. If one's turned on, the other's turned off, and it's for a very good reason. So one thing that I think is powerful about the autonomic nervous system is we can look at a lot of mental health processes and a lot of mental health struggles and see how much this system impacts them. And yet, it's there for a very good reason. So it's just that, you know, how we have used it within our life for various reasons, it's gone awry, but initially, by itself, it was there for a good reason. So just looking at the sympathetic nervous system, this is the fight or flight response, is a way to remember a little bit about what's happening, but it's when you're in a dangerous situation. You're full of fear. Could also be full of aggression, those kind of strong emotions. If you're thinking of your brain and then you go to the middle, okay, you have your limbic system, which is called the emotional center of the brain. And you don't have to remember all this, but it's just good to understand. It is something, limbic system. It is something that if you can remember some of these terms and how to describe them in a way that's very easy to understand, absolutely one of the best psychoeducational groups I've ever done for DV groups. It's very exciting for somebody to understand what's happening in their body, especially things like PTSD and anything where you're going to have an arousal of this autonomic nervous system when they might do things they didn't know they were going to do, okay? To understand why gives people peace sometimes. It doesn't actually change anything sometimes. Sometimes it does, but it definitely can help people understand why and they appreciate it. So you have your limbic system, which is seen as the emotional center of the brain. I'm trying to decide if I want to move this before I use it more. There's other rooms, but they didn't have air conditioning and big ceilings. So, okay, emotional center of the brain. Okay, one very, very powerful little part of the brain, right smack in the middle of the limbic system, in the middle of your brain. I say that because doesn't it seem like something in the middle will be more powerful to control everything else? Okay, it is the amygdala. I guess I'm doing all caps. Amygdala, sure. Okay, the amygdala. So the amygdala, a little teeny tiny little part of the brain that would excrete hormones during times when something in the prefrontal cortex of your brain says, danger, danger, this is a serious situation, your life's being threatened. It could be, you know, severe aggression, rage, whatever's triggering this system. The most common would be something that's you're in fear of your life. Okay, so if somebody came in and started screaming and pointing a gun to your head right now, absolutely your amygdala would start flooding hormones into your body and your sympathetic nervous system would be activated. Okay, so can anybody tell me from past educational experiences on this topic what is the first hormone that will come if your body has a stress response? Adrenaline. Very good. Okay, so number one, you have adrenaline. Now, somebody has to help me spell that. I know there's an I somewhere. E. All right, adrenaline. So what would happen to your body and your brain with adrenaline? Give me some ideas of what that looks like. Okay, very good. Heart rate increases. Adrenaline's fantastic. Okay, there's some great fun stuff with adrenaline. Moms are picking up cars. Okay, you might have extra strength you never knew you had. What helps with your thought process? Yeah, everything else stops and you zoom in. Okay, you just right there to what's most important. And you can see how this is fantastic. How wonderful. If you were in a life-threatening situation, wouldn't you want extra power, tons of adrenaline flowing through your body so you just have this strength beyond what you thought you could have? And wouldn't you want focus on what's most important and just be able to ignore everything else just to have all your time and attention focused on something to survive? Okay? It's fantastic. It was a process that was initially wonderful, and if it happens in the right moment, can save your life and save the lives of other people. It's wonderful. The problem is when we are activating this because Starbucks is closed, okay? So our society has gone a little crazy with it. So we'll figure that out here in a moment. But you have this fight or flight response, okay? You can, and even though we say the fight or flight response, you can fight, and you're going to have extra ability to do that. You can run away super, super fast, or you can freeze, right? And freeze is a lot of times what has to happen to a kid, okay? So if a kid is in a situation where parents especially are aggressive and violent, or they're in a dangerous situation and they can't escape, their option is to freeze. Okay? For whatever reason, maybe the door's open, but something about the environment is creating it in the kid's mind that they can't escape. Their option is to freeze. If a child experiences that more often than not, bet you they're going to freeze when they're an adult too. Remember the learned responses. So a terrible situation happens, and everybody's looking at, well, you're a grown adult. What's your problem? Just run. Run as fast as you can with all that adrenaline, or fight with all that adrenaline. And what does the adult do? Freeze. And doesn't even realize there's two other options. And we see this in behavior therapy when you're looking at experiments back with Skinner and, you know, some of these guys looking from the perspective of talking about operant conditioning and classical conditioning. Well, they used to love to do experiments that were terrible and not allowed today, but we learned a lot from them. So they take a cat, they put it in a room, they electrocuted the cat. The cat's jumping everywhere, and then they put a, you know, the couch on there, not the couch, but whatever the thing looked like a couch. Cat jumped on it, escaped the electricity. Yes, okay. Then took that couch out of there, and there's no way to escape. They electrocute the cat. The cat is jumping around for a while, then just curls up and lays there, taking the electricity. Then they put the couch back. The cat could get on the couch and escape, but it does not. It lays down and takes the electricity. Okay, now we are, in my opinion, I guess, not animals, but sure do work like that sometimes. That here's this natural process, you know, that you see animals all over the place that have the same type of learning responses we have, and that if they are put in a situation where they can't escape and they learn that they can't escape, the way out may be right there, so easy to see, and they don't see it. They just take the negative consequences. Okay? And you know, you can think of people right now that are doing that same thing. It looks like the door's wide open. Just leave. And they don't. Just change your behavior. Do something else. They don't see the other options. They only see that they have to take this electricity. Okay? So that's the freeze, and that can happen. So you can see as we start talking how these all combine together. We're bringing in biological processes, operant conditioning, family generational problems being passed down. all of these kind of mold eventually. As we're focusing on just one, we'll bring in the others. But the fight or flight response is natural and fantastic. But if they're not allowed to fight or not allowed to run, you have what's called the freeze, right? The problem with this also, and you're going to get this a little bit again when they're looking at trauma-informed therapy, which is something that's really important with domestic violence, is that you understand the consequences of past trauma on current life situations. If you have this fight or flight response activated, the first hormone is adrenaline. Anybody know what the second hormone that comes after that if the stress continues? Cortisol. Cortisol. Does that sound familiar to you? Obviously, if you've heard me or if you study this, you know what cortisol is. But for those of this kind of your first time thinking of all of this, cortisol might sound familiar from commercials. What do people think about cortisol having to do with weight? Does that sound familiar? Okay. They might say that, you know, if you have a lot of cortisol, you're going to get a lot of weight in your belly, and that's true. Okay, so people that have a lot of stress and have a lot of anxiety, past childhood abuse, things like that, because of this lovely hormone cortisol, could have, you know, weight gain right in a special area in their belly. But you might see it in commercials just because of weight loss, you know, programs that they have. Okay, but cortisol is very fun. Let's think together, because some of you already know the answer to this. What happens to your body when it starts being flooded with cortisol? Anybody know? Okay, your digestive system's turned off. Okay, you do not need your digestive system anymore. Digestive system. Okay, what else is turned off? Your immune system. No more immune system. Okay, those are the big processes. Other things are shut off. Why does it start shutting all these systems off? Absolutely. Yes. You're going to die or live. The system is created for those situations where you have to win a fight of survival. So whether you're running or whether you're fighting, this is important. Your life's at stake if this system's activated. And so cortisol is when the stress continues. Adrenaline's been used and the stress continues. Cortisol stays. And the sympathetic nervous system stays activated. And it shuts off your digestive system, shuts off your immune system. Guess what else it shuts off? This is a fun one. And the groups, this is the great educational piece to bring into these domestic violent groups. What else is shut off? Huh? Sex drive can be affected. Amygdala is right there with your hypothalamus that regulates all of those, your emotions, your sex drive, your sleep-wake cycle, your whether you're hungry or not. Okay, so now think of anxiety, think of depression. All these things are right there, smack in the middle of this emotional center of the brain, all being affected. So yeah, all of it is affected sometimes when one thing's affected. No, your prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex. Anybody know what your prefrontal cortex says? Yes. Sure. Executive functioning, problem solving, seeing consequences of your action. Teenagers lack full development of their prefrontal cortex. Does that make more sense now? And I tell parents they just don't have their whole brain yet. Give them time. Okay? So teenagers do not have a fully functioning prefrontal cortex until they're about 22, 23. So the ability to think ahead, plan ahead, to see consequences of action, all of that. Also bipolar shows a decrease in activity in the prefrontal cortex. Okay, so if you think of what first comes to mind when you think of bipolar, if you think of teenagers and some of the trouble they get themselves in because they look like adults, they want to be adults, they have hormones racing through them like crazy, and then they don't have a fully functioning prefrontal cortex. Okay, and they're going to get themselves into trouble. With prefrontal cortex, the ability to think through, analyze, that would be really helpful if you're making stupid mistakes, right? So the trick with this prefrontal cortex and all these systems is going back to the two broad nervous systems here, sympathetic and parasympathetic. They don't work at the same time, right? You can't have them both working at the same time. They are counter to each other for good reason. You activate this when you need it, and then you activate your parasympathetic nervous system to turn off your sympathetic nervous system. So if you think of the opposite of a sympathetic nervous system, that's your parasympathetic. What would come with the parasympathetic nervous system? What would happen if it's turned on? Everything will come back. Thank you. Good job. We've got our prefrontal cortex now. We're getting our digestive system back. We're getting our immune system back. Okay? What would your body feel like if you think of the stress response? If you think of fight or flight and what's happening in your body, what does your body feel like when the parasympathetic nervous system comes on? Calm. Okay? So we'll just do, we're running out, I'll erase eventually, but we could do calm. How's your breathing? Slow breathing, slower breathing, okay. Heart rate, slower, okay. So as the parasympathetic nervous system is turned on, it will shut off the stress response and all your systems go back working properly, okay. Your brain can come back on. Your brain that separates you from animals. You know, this part right here that says, I can think things through, I can analyze, I can make good decisions, I can remember the consequences, it all comes back, okay? What if the parasympathetic nervous system never came on and your sympathetic nervous system stayed on? What problems would you see? Okay, anxiety, what was the first thing you said? Sure, a lot. How would you like, and I know some of you, I mean, usually somebody in the room struggles with anxiety. So for those, you feel it, you know, just imagine what it feels like in your body. Keep it. Don't let it turn off. It stays on. That's hard. Okay, what else? Depression can come. And so we see, and we're talking about, you know, guys are allowed to have anger and that's it sometimes in society. You know, so same type of thing is you may be depressed and what it's going to look like is different. So depression could be the core. And if you remember right in the very, very, very middle when we're talking about this limbic system, all of those systems that are giving you the symptoms of depression are all in the same spot. Sleep-wake cycle, sex drive, hunger, and then these feelings of strong emotion. You're going to probably have difficulty one way or the other in all of these areas. Did you say something? Agitated? Sure. Yep, definitely. What's sad about this, and it impacts domestic violence because you do see the family generational patterns, is that if the kid gets the cortisol and cannot escape, so the stress system is staying active and gets all the negative consequences that are coming with that, there's also brain damage. And this is where trauma-informed treatment comes in because they see a physical difference in the brain of a kid that had trauma versus a kid that did not. So this is helpful because in working with perpetrators, there is hope. I have seen it, and I have seen people change their lives. I have one lady I thought about inviting. I still might text her and just see if she's around, which is unethical from one perspective because she was a client, but now it's more popular that counselors do this with new laws in California. Whatever the case, she turned her whole life around, and she's still doing good. Like usually, like they get excited, and then you wait for the time when it all goes back to how it was. And she just has stayed on track. She's doing wonderful. Somewhere in there, something clicked, and that was it. and she's done great. But with this, sometimes that impact comes when parents realize the impact it has on their kid. Now, you're going to work with a lot of people that are not parents or that don't care about their kid, and that can happen. All I'm saying, like I said at the beginning, is there's so few leverage points at all with this population. This is one leverage point, if you can find it, that can work. So that's why I bring it up. No matter what this parent seems to be, a lot of times there's still something inside them that says, you know, I care about my kid. With that in mind, sometimes when you share the impact that this has on the kid's body and brain and future, it can make a difference, and they will change a behavior. And it will be difficult, but they'll have that motivation at least to try to find an alternative way of getting their needs met, of whatever the reason is they're acting violent. So it's well worth it to understand this, to be able to explain it and teach it, and let people know the consequences of it. And then for themselves too, you know, to understand what it's doing to their body as well. Now, there's more to this that directly impacts domestic violence. Where you have your amygdala, we're on a road. I hope you guys are staying on this road, okay? Where you have your amygdala, there's another organ really, really, really close right there called the hippocampus. Okay, so remember your amygdala. Right next to it, you have your hippocampus. That's a guess. Okay, hippocampus. So when you store memory, most common way is to have an event happen. It's stored for a short time, and short-term memory is going to be processed and filtered through in long-term memory eventually. A lot of times when we think of memory, we think of a visual memory. You know, so we picture the memory we have stored on our left hemisphere. Some memories, though, are stored in the hippocampus. With these memories, they retain the emotional content, and it might be something more experiential. So you may not even think of the actual visual memory. It could, but it might be, you know, your body feels it. You walk in a room and you just know, okay, I've been here and this is not good, okay? So it's a different type of memory. Memories stored in the hippocampus are seen as flashcard memories, okay? They have the strong emotional attachment. If it was moved over to the left hemisphere, it would lose that, because the right hemisphere stores strong emotions. The left hemisphere doesn't. The emotion in the left hemisphere is satiation. I'm good. It's all good. It's not happy. It's not sad. It's just, yep. So if you think of a person doing some kind of an analytical problem, they're not super happy or euphoric. They're not super sad. They're just, you know, it's just a peaceful, satisfied math problem. You know, if you don't like math, then maybe it's on the right hemisphere. But, you know, that's the idea, okay? If you think of stereotypical ideas that people will throw out about men and women, this is why. Because women have more ability to go back and forth between right and left hemisphere, and men tend to just jump on over to the left hemisphere and stay there. When they're ready to go to the right side, sure, they'll jump over, but it's not flipping back and forth. So it appears sometimes that women are more emotional and men are not. And that's part of why, is this biological difference in the brain. Of course, you have women that have more male brain and men that have more female brain, biologically too. But for the most part, that's where the stereotype comes from. So if you think of, you know, the stereotype of a male versus female, it helps you remember right hemisphere versus left hemisphere. So now going to this hippocampus with this flashcard memory, okay? This is very, very important. It'll make sense soon. Flashcard tied to strong emotions, okay? When you have something just normal happen and you want to decide, what should I do? I am stuck with this situation. I'm trying to figure it out. Let me problem solve. I'm going to go ahead and jump to my prefrontal cortex and use my executive skills here to think through the consequences, to look at all the options, and I'm going to make a good decision, okay? If all of a sudden something happened to you that shocked you, scared you, and your fight or flight is activated, you don't have time to jump up to your prefrontal cortex, think things through and consequences. You're dead, okay? Sorry. It's too late. You took too long problem solving, okay? So part of this sympathetic nervous system is that it's going to give you the ability to jump to your flashcard, pull it out fast, and respond. Okay? The flashcard memory that it's pulling out from the hippocampus is based on past experiences handed together with the strong emotion attached to that. So if you have past experiences of a very healthy, wonderful childhood, and you reach into your hippocampus and you pull that out, you're probably fine. Terrible situation, fast, act. Okay, everything in your system's activated. You go and you just do what comes natural. You don't think it through. You just respond, react to the situation. If you've got some great, healthy flashcards from your past experience, sure. If you've got some unusual flashcards, you're going to have a problem because you're not thinking it through. You're grabbing a flashcard and you're acting. What have I done a million times before? It might be the situation. So a feeling that you're experiencing or a smell or something about the situation reminds you of the time frame that has this flashcard memory. That's a flashcard memory you pull and you act. So if you're scared, if you feel vulnerable, if, this is why you have adults freezing, okay? Because all of a sudden they're in a moment where they feel scared and vulnerable. They flash back fast to the moment of being 5 and scared and vulnerable, and they reach that flashcard, and it says, freeze, do nothing. You can't escape. Okay? If they have violence in their past, they grab it, it says, beat your way out fast. Okay? So when you activate this sympathetic nervous system, with it, you get, it's basically like the amygdala is right there. I'll bring a brain for you, okay? The amygdala is right there. The hippocampus covers it. They're really close together. They go together, same hormones being affected right here. The hippocampus is what's going to probably determine behavior in that moment. So if you have somebody with a past that has violence, it is that much more likely if given stressful situation with the sympathetic nervous system activated that they're going to act in that exact same manner. It's not a guarantee, but that is why biologically sometimes this pattern's repeated. Does that make sense? I'm going to talk a little bit about the application of this, but I'll take a moment to see if anybody has questions on this. Okay? Yes? Mm-hmm. I wonder if reminding clients or parents of the idea about helping our children have quick flashcards. Yes. I like that idea. Absolutely. It's a fantastic idea. And, it's something that you could manually insert. It's something you could even set the stage for, that you could set up moments and events on purpose just so they get this experience. And you think of that with child development where you want to set a kid up to accomplish something well. Okay, so you give them extra things. You set everything up so that they get that experience that they did it. They did a great job at something. And it looks terrible. That's fantastic. That's amazing because you want them to, I did it. And they get that feeling. You could set up these moments. Even, we talked about that balance between what if you are, especially from a culture, but there's plenty of families that's just family of origin more than culture, but it's a sense of kids obey. I don't care what it is. Be quiet, obey. Well, depending on where they're going to be in their life, does that set them up to be abused? Because they don't question, they don't fight back, they just do what's told, and adults have that ultimate authority. Is there a balance that you could actually have opportunities to practice, set the stage as a parent, to practice to have your kid have a voice? And to say, I don't like this, I don't want to do this, here's why. And to practice those skills in a way that's outside of discipline. You have life happening over here, and on purpose you take time to give them this experience so that they have some experience in their background and their flashcards that allows them to handle any situation. And something that I think it's on a slide somewhere, has to deal with coping skills. I had a woman, and this will relate, I'll tie it in a sec. I had a woman that beat her kids, but she would tie them up naked and beat them. why? How is this possible? How is it? Why? Who thinks of this? But she honestly didn't see another option. That is the option that came to her as the best option. She was willing to learn new coping skills. She obviously still struggled as a mom in a lot of ways, but it wasn't that she was, this person that just belonged in jail forever. She actually had hope. I mean, she was willing to try a lot of things to better her parenting. In that moment, she was so overwhelmed, so filled with anxiety, so far gone, and wherever she was at, that's what made sense to her. So the idea of helping them see more options for coping skills is important. They're not bad people sometimes. It is also, what options do they have from? Are they pulling from past experiences? Are they pulling from the flashcard? So to purposely bring in events, even with adults, to practice other ways of handling it is really, really helpful. Okay? So anything else with this sympathetic nervous system being activated? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, absolutely. So in an addiction class, when I'm talking about it, this is how I like to describe it visually. That seems like a bad idea. Okay, so dopamine's fantastic, right? You have this neurotransmitter in your brain that, some neurotransmitters say, feel sad, some say feel happy. They have all these messages, and hopefully they're balanced. But dopamine, if you were flooded with dopamine, you would feel fantastic. Okay, depending on how much, if it went too far. But an example is when people orgasm. That's dopamine flooding. It's powerful. It's fantastic. Okay, when you jump out of a plane, because you're an adrenaline junkie. Adrenaline's great too, but nothing's compared to dopamine. You may be flooded with dopamine. Some people in scary situations are flooded with dopamine, and they love being scared. So there's a lot of power in dopamine that has nothing to do with the drug. You may be addicted to the drug and alcohol, but then you bring in this aspect that you're addicted to your own neurochemical reaction that's happening because of how fantastic dopamine is. So within that pathway, domestic violence can be there. You could be addicted to that feeling that comes when dopamine is flooding you. But also, it could just be, that pairing. What did you say? Because I lost my train of thought and I can't bring it back. What's your initial comment? Substance abuse, addiction. Is that it? Oh, I remember. Changing them. Okay. So whenever you do something, in your brain, it's a physical reaction. Every single thing you do it is a physical reaction in your brain, right? So if you do something again and again and again and again and again and again, there's a groove in your brain of that chemical reaction, okay? That's a habit. Could be eventually an addiction. So go. It's a groove, a physical groove of this neurochemical reaction that's happening. If you wanted to change that, you're up on top of this. It's so easy to fall right back in. So you're trying to come up over here physically in your brain. You're trying to avoid something that is a groove that's so easy to fall into. So when you think of addictions, when you think of patterns, habits, all of this, you can change them, but boy, are they going to be extremely difficult from many areas. You have operant conditioning, classical conditioning like we talked about. You also have your brain working against you. It is hard, but the hope is that it's possible. And the best way to do it is to do something different again and again and again. Okay? Even if you don't want to. Somewhere on one of these slides, I have fake it till you make it. And I tell clients that, okay? Because it's a different behavior. And if you do it again and again and again, your brain will catch up with you eventually. And it won't be so difficult. And the idea within, a lot of these counseling theories is, well, does thoughts impact behaviors, or do behaviors impact thoughts? And what about the brain? It is all absolutely connected. So you could think differently, and it would impact your brain and your body and your actions. but you could also change your behavior. And your brain would start changing too, and your thought process would change. So you have a lot of leverage points to bring in on what to change that will have a ripple effect and change everything else. Okay? So I wanted to tie in at the very end what you could do. That's an example of, yes, you can change behaviors, even if you don't want to, that would eventually have a new neural pathway. And it's very difficult. And I like to say that. I like to set people up that there's hope, but how difficult it's going to be. Otherwise, they get all excited, they walk out the door, and it's harder than they ever realized, and they give up fast. So I like to paint a bleak picture to some extent that if you're ready for this, absolutely you can, but it's going to be so difficult. Fight every day, that type of a thing. I'd rather them have it be easier than they expected than to have it more difficult than they expected. So that's an example of something you could do. If you change your behavior, it would change your chemical process, and you could get out of an addiction that way. I think other things need to be involved, but that's an example. With this, you have also a helpful tool here. Because the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system are opposite of each other, and one's on, one's off, rather than focusing so much on turning your sympathetic nervous system off, you could focus more on turning your parasympathetic nervous system on. Okay? How would you activate a parasympathetic nervous system? From everything I've talked about, you probably have some guesses. How would you activate this system that calms you down? Yes, breathing. Okay? If you took a deep breath right now, take a deep breath. Okay? What is physically happening at that moment? If you take more deep breaths especially, but what is physically happening when you take a deep breath? Slowing down your heart rate. What else? How is it slowing down your heart rate? Yes, you're taking in, increasing your oxygen. Okay? And you almost cannot avoid it. If you stop and take deep breaths, no matter how anxious you think you are physically putting more oxygen inside your body and your brain. It's going to have an impact. So the idea of relaxation techniques that you learn and all of these aspects around that has to do with physically trying to control and turn on the sympathetic nervous system. If you were able to calm your heart rate, calm your breathing, and increase the amount of oxygen, and slow and relax your whole body, the parasympathetic nervous system would be activated, and it would shut off your sympathetic nervous system. So there is an amount of control. Now, obviously, much easier said than done, but it is worth practicing. So I'd never present it as take deep breaths. They do that with the military. I remember it was like they spent millions and millions of dollars to tell them to take deep breaths, Yes, it is true, but you can't just present it like that because they're like, it's not working. So there has to be more, but it is true. It's just you might have to frame it a little different and then practice it. Practice learning how your body works, how to control it, how to snap yourself out of going down this anxiety, stress road to relax and stay calm. And then what's really nice about the parasympathetic nervous system is that if it's activated, your immune system will come back on, your digestive system will come back on, and your prefrontal cortex will come back on. Hopefully before you did anything stupid. Because once it comes back on, you go, what? Where am I? I can't even tell you one story, but it was interesting. And boy, did that woman look around and think, how in the world did I end up in this situation? And she had to do 52 weeks out of it, but I've never heard a story like it. And it did involve drugs and alcohol and no prefrontal cortex, okay? So hopefully you can help clients learn how to activate their prefrontal cortex before it comes back on and it's too late. Okay, and there's strategies we'll have to get them to care about this. that we'll look at in the intervention methods. So we're going to take a quick break just to do what we've planned on having these more breaks than normal. So get up, walk around, go outside. I think that's helpful. This lighting's not as bad as some fluorescent lighting, but still you might do better to last longer if you go outside and get sun. Yes. Okay. Yeah, sure. Yep, definitely. There's more hope than it seems. I like to make it seem extreme, and then I'll tie it back in a little bit better. There's more hope. Chrissy, I just shut the computer, or X, or what do I do? You told me you're going to be late, huh? Okay. I'm recording everything, so that'll help. I'm just going to close it and then open it and